Hello good people, I'm Dmitry, and if you're into 60% keyboards, something small, something compact, the Razer Huntsman Mini is a solid recommendation. I will feel like Marquez when I say this, but I've had this keyboard for several months and I've been using it extensively in the Razer's feedback process, and now finally receiving the retail unit and using it extensively for the past 3 weeks. Razer's direction with keyboards is absolutely fantastic. They're on track to really dominate that space, and listening to feedback from the community, from gamers and the mainstream, and they've done a fantastic job in improving the optical red linear switch, the Gen 2 versus the Gen 1 that we saw on the Razer Huntsman TE. But I will say Razer can do better. The keyboard is fantastic, but it makes me wanting more. Now, some of the things are mitigated by the custom review samples like I have here with the Hardware Canucks spacebar. It's not anything special, but it is appreciated. So in this video, let's talk about everything that is new on these Gen 2 optical linear switches, compared how they sound and how they feel versus the Razer Huntsman TE, and also compared to some of the other 60% Ducky keyboards. And that is kind of where things kind of become a little bit challenging for the Huntsman Mini. So here's my long-term review of the Razer Huntsman Mini, a keyboard with a lot of potential, but it's not perfect. It's true what they say about the Corsair A100. We've got water-cooled hardware for cool temperatures, a cool design that stands out with plenty of good I/O. It's whisper quiet with an efficient fan and occupies as much space on my desk as my plant. The Corsair A100, up to 16 cores with a 2080 Ti. It does not disappoint. Check it out below. Alright, so first quickly, let's cover all the basics. Price-wise, you're looking at two SKUs, $119 and $129 depending on the switch variety. The one interesting thing we were discussing with Mike and Eber is, like, with this keyboard, where is the Razer tax? It is kind of funny how we've gotten accustomed to Razer delivering competitive prices for their keyboards and their mice, and with this keyboard, what is the catch? Perhaps we've gotten so accustomed to Razer's really expensive price points for pretty much all of their peripherals until like a few years ago, so we kind of believe and perceive that $129, $119 is a good value, but still it is quite expensive, although in line with other 60% keyboards. So we have the Razer Clicky optical switches, the purple ones, and we also have the Gen 2 improved Razer linear optical switches. I was completely surprised at how fantastic they felt versus the original on the Huntsman TE, and you are paying that $10 premium for the Gen 2 linear switches because of lubing. So factory lubing is applied on all switches, and we also have silicone dampeners on every single switch. Therefore, they feel smoother, quieter, and there's no longer that rattle and the nasty noise that we really didn't appreciate on the Huntsman TE. Take a listen. So really, aside from the space-saving advantages you get with a 60% keyboard, that is really the main advantage of getting the Huntsman Mini over the Huntsman TE. And I really wish that the TE was also updated with the Gen 2 switches, because, I mean, based on that sound test, I can tell you 100% the Gen 2 feels so much better. But the Huntsman TE with the Gen 2 switches would be like my perfect gaming TKL keyboard. So the improvement really comes from the lubing to smooth out on how the switch travels, and also the silicone dampeners not affecting on how the switch feels. Because normally if you were to put dampeners on like the MX stem, you would have that little bottoming out effect that is kind of squishy. So none of that is present here, which is awesome. Instead, you have this really satisfying density when you bottom out, equivalent to something like on Leopold keyboards when they put this like felt carpet inside the frame. So it not only mutes the sound, but it also softens out all the bottoming out strokes. So it's kind of equivalent here with the Huntsman Mini. As with the Huntsman TE, the switches are incredibly light, so you have to kind of train not to accidentally depress the keys just with the weight of your fingers. But really for FPS gaming, nothing but pleasure with the Huntsman Mini. As for my analysis on the Clicky switches, they're not lubed, nor do they have silicone dampeners like their linear switches do, because they don't really need them here. You still have a bit of a clunky sound profile to them, but they do have a very different feel versus your other Clicky switches from Cherry and Kale. These feel very similar to Razer Greens, light actuation, and kind of a soft clicky point. They're not my favorite clickies, but they're not as loud as others. As for the rest of the keyboard, all the fantastic basics carry over from the Huntsman TE. So we have a long color-coded Type-C cable with a large space opening in the frame itself for custom cables. The keycaps are double-shot PBT, and the texture is slightly more rough than what we get with Ducky, but the font is incredibly clean and crisp without the usual artifacts that we notice on like the really fine characters on the standard PBT keycaps. So whatever Razer has done here is applauded. Nice. I'm actually surprised that the illumination on the Mercury edition isn't as bright as I would expect for a white body, simply because the LED is below the keycap and it doesn't really help to illuminate the frame underneath, so all the light shines right through the keycap. We have all the standard 60% shortcuts printed on front of the keycap in a separate color, so you can easily see them. We have the function key that highlights all the shortcuts, including media control, all your F keys, including lighting customization, macro recordings, and your arrow keys. Since the layout is also completely standardized, you can swap out the keycaps, which is awesome, and Razer actually sells a bunch of their own PBT keycaps, including pink, green, black, and mercury. The frame is also completely clean and simple with only the Razer text embedded in the front, which is kind of hidden, and we have the dual step angle adjustment at the bottom with 6 or 9 degrees. So now let's step back and talk about why I feel like Razer can do better. If we take a look at the competition from Ducky, especially with the Mecha Mini, it seems to offer slightly better value versus the Huntsman Mini. Even though, I get it, it's the first 60% mainstream gaming keyboard, I feel like Razer really could have approached it from a perspective of dominance, and yet they didn't. The aluminum frame on the Mecha Mini feels fantastic, and in comparison to the Huntsman Mini, the Mini is all plastic and super light, which is an advantage if you travel, and it's probably a good thing for most, but when it's on your desk, it just doesn't feel as premium. It would be awesome if the frame was weighted to give you a bit more stability, because even though we have the rubber pads at the bottom, the keyboard does slide around. The second point of advantage for Ducky would be the additional value add keycaps. And this is something that would be fantastic for Razer to include, like a Razer Green Escape or something for the function key. And I get that it might interact and kind of ruin the whole clean aesthetic of the keyboard and might not fully go with like if you are switching your keycaps, but the value add element is just not there with the Huntsman Mini. And the third point is that while I really appreciate Razer for improving the switch feel, it still has a lot of like wiggle room inside the frame, and it not only wiggles the actual switch, but it in turn wiggles the keycap as well. It's not a substantial takeaway from the build quality, but Razer had time to perfect the switch feel, yet they didn't fix this thing where the switch kind of wobbles inside the frame, and you know, when you're typing, you can kind of feel the keys kind of floating around. I even noticed it on my black model when I swapped out the keycaps, because the bottom row, you can clearly see the edge and all the keycaps are slightly misaligned. When I was swapping out the keycaps on my Mercury edition, one of the keys actually got stuck. Luckily, this is the only time it's happened, so I wouldn't worry about that. And my last point would be about Razer Synapse. I know everyone loves to complain about it. I think it's a powerful program. You can do a lot with it. Save full profiles directly onto the keyboard, which is awesome. Customize all the keys, create different shortcuts. My complaint here is really about the initial setup when you plug in new Razer peripherals into your PC, because all my USB peripherals shut down during the installation of whatever is happening with Razer Synapse and this product. And then you have to restart, and then I have to do the same thing for the other keyboard as it recognizes it as like a separate product, even though they're both Huntsman Minis. So if you are after a 60% keyboard, I feel like the Huntsman Mini is a strong contender on the market, and it's a good way to push the industry forward. Hopefully we'll see a 60% from Logitech or Corsair, but unlikely, because Razer is really the only company who are reaching out to reviewers and media and community and really trying to engage and seeing what people want. Even though I know this will not sell well in volumes versus like full-size keyboards, but still it's really awesome to see them try something new. So aside from this being an almost perfect 60% keyboard, my 3 complaints include no additional keycaps to a little customize and add value to an already pretty expensive product at $129. It's even more expensive than the Huntsman TE, even though the reason behind this is because the additional lubes from factory and also the silicone dampeners on all the linear switches. Complaint number 2, I feel like the frame is a bit too light for my taste. Even though we have an aluminum base plate here to really add rigidity to the frame, I just wish it was slightly heavier. And the minor complaint number 3 would be with the initial Razer Synapse installation. When you plug in Razer peripherals, on how it shuts down all the other USB peripherals while this thing installs something with Razer Synapse. I wish it wouldn't do that. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed. I will be keeping this keyboard in my keyboard arsenal because the Gen 2 linear optical switches feel fantastic, especially with that dampening of the silicone. And it's one of the reasons why I'm still using the Extra K4 keyboard, because all the large keys are dampened and silent. And if you're after the Clicky format and the 60% body, this is an alternative. And the Clickies here, they feel totally different versus MX Blues. Not as sharp of a Clicky point, and also are much lighter. So I would guess that's a positive for gaming. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to check out this other relevant content. Subscribe for more. I'll talk to you in the next video. Back to Horizon Dawn. Oh, wait. Horizon Zero Dawn, yeah.